Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. We're now on part 2 of the Group Innovation Techniques lecture. Here we're just going to talk about solution generation. So in the previous lecture we talked about basic problem solving and problem analysis. Now we're going to get to some techniques you can use to generate solutions. Now, what we're going to be talking about in this lecture are 4 different techniques you can use for brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is just simply a set of problem-solving techniques to generate creative options in a group context. The first type of brainstorming, and you might be familiar with this type, is just called traditional brainstorming. So this is kind of what you might have heard of before. When you do traditional brainstorming, we're going to assume that you are the facilitator. The first thing that you got to do with your group is identify the problem. Now, in the previous lecture, we talked about breaking the problem to pieces, looking at the who, what, when, where, and why, and all of those things. So as a group, you're going to make sure that you agree on what exactly the problem is. Then, after you've identified the problem and you've came up with criteria for the solution, you're going to set a clear time limit for the brainstorming session. So, depending on how much you allot in your agenda, you're going to maybe say, we're going to set 20 minutes to allow for brainstorming, and you're going to keep everyone to that time because the time pressure is going to ensure that people stay on track and that people are thinking and focused. Then, before you start the time, you're going to ask everyone to suspend all judgment. So when we say suspend judgment, what that means is do not critique any ideas, because right now, we're in the parameter zone. You're setting parameters for what's actually going to occur in this little box here, okay? So you're setting the group up. In steps 1 through 3, what you're essentially doing is you're setting everyone up for the box right here, which is going to be the brainstorming. So you're going to do that in the parameter zone, and this little box is called the non-judgment zone. So during this zone, you do not critique any ideas. What'll happen next is you're going to have everyone suggest as many ideas as possible. And the way I've seen it done really effectively is the facilitator will just say, whatever comes to your mind, just say it. So just turn off your filters. Even if it sounds silly, share the idea. So everyone's just going to share whatever ideas they have. If anyone says, that doesn't work, nope, we're not in that zone right now. So as a facilitator, you have to shut down any criticism that anybody may try to give. And I know this can be hard because some people are born to criticize and some people, I can't criticize stuff, but it's a bad idea. Okay, that's fine. We're not in the judgment zone right now. We're in the non-judgment zone. So this is the critical component to brainstorming. And this is where people mess up, is they don't do this part. They don't set parameters and they don't say, ask to suspend judgment. So that kills all the possible creativity that a brainstorming session can have because people are afraid to speak. People are afraid they're going to be judged, or people are afraid that people are going to laugh at their ideas. So as a facilitator, you have to protect the non-judgment zone. So you're going to tell people, suggest as many ideas as possible. And this is the other thing. You want to encourage piggybacking. So piggybacking is just simply the idea that if somebody, let's say you're in the brainstorming zone and somebody says something, and I'm like, oh, that makes me think of this. Okay, cool. The cool thing about brainstorming is nobody owns an idea. And that should also be something that's emphasized. So if John makes this idea and then it makes you think of something and you say, hey, piggybacking on John, if we did John's idea and then we also did this, wouldn't that be cool? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. That's piggybacking and that's great. That's exactly what you want to see happen in brainstorming, in fact, is people building on each other's ideas and piggybacking off each other. And once again, no judgment, regardless of whatever they say. Now, this is the other critical component. And so once again, people mess up because they don't do this part. You got to record all the ideas. So if people are throwing out ideas and you're just kind of like staring at them, like, oh, that's good, yeah, okay. So that doesn't help. You got to record the ideas because a lot of ideas will get thrown out and some ideas might get forgotten, or some ideas, like, you didn't know what to do with them at first, but then later you're going to look at the list of all the ideas like, wait a minute, let's go back to that other idea from the beginning. And then you tie that idea back in and then it's this beautiful moment. So what you have to do to record all the ideas is you got to make sure that when the ideas are being recorded, there's a common visual display. So remember from the meetings lecture, we talked about location. So if you're going to engage in a brainstorming session or a problem-solving meeting, you want to make sure you have that common visual display because that's where all the ideas are going to be recorded. You might do that on a whiteboard. You might do that on a Word doc on a projector screen. You might do it on a Google Jamboard. I mean, there's all kinds of technologies and ways you can have a common visual display. Everybody has to be able to see the common visual display for this to take its full effect. So you have to make sure everybody can see it and it's not just one person on the laptop and nobody else can see it. Because when people also see all the ideas, them reading some of the ideas can also spark some things too. You're trying to spark people's imaginations and brains as much as you can during this zone. Okay, so this is the non-judgment zone. Now, you've set a clear time limit. Maybe you said 20 minutes. Okay, so you've done 4, 5, and 6. You've suggested as many ideas as possible. People are piggybacking. You've recorded all ideas. And 20 minutes are over. Okay, great. Now we're done with the non-judgment zone. The next part is the action zone. Now, this is where you're going to take all these wondrous ideas that were thrown onto the board or onto the screen or whatever, and now you're going to figure out how to take action on them. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to evaluate each idea. So you go through each idea on the board. Now, if one idea is like super out there, you might not spend that much time on it, but you go through literally every idea. So you don't skip one, you go through each of them. If people don't like an idea, they'll probably toss it away, but you should at least try to think of one positive and one area of weakness for each idea. So because sometimes people may have thought this was a good idea, but nobody praised it, so everyone just kind of stayed quiet about it. So you go through each idea and you try to talk about a positive thing and a negative thing. You want to give every idea a fair trial. Once you've gone through the ideas, you then decide on the best action. Now, based on when you go through evaluation, I'm sure when you go through an idea, somebody's going to raise their hand like, I don't like this. And then somebody might be like, oh, I really like that. That kind of stuff. Okay, cool. You'll kind of get a feel for the discussion if there's 2 or 3 ideas that have really taken hold on people based on their nonverbals and based on their reaction. Like if people are sounding really excited about one particular idea, then you can go ahead and put that on the ballot. And then in that case, just put the ideas on the ballot that you think that you think have a shot or you think people really like, and put them on the ballot. And then you can do a ranking, rating, or voting based on what you think would be the best situation for you all. The key to brainstorming. So this is one of the big things to all this. The key to brainstorming is you have to keep idea generation separate from evaluation. You do not do idea generation at the same time as you do idea evaluation. You make those two separate things. You do not throw out an idea and then immediately shoot it down, because that's what shuts off brainstorming for people. Okay, so that's traditional brainstorming. If you're a meeting facilitator, this is what you want to be thinking about when you're trying to do any kind of problem solving or innovation meeting. Now, there's a second type of brainstorming, and it's a good little technique to use when you really want to have members not feel like they own an idea. And it's called the nominal group technique, also known as silent brainstorming. What makes the nominal group technique unique is it takes a lot of the principles of traditional brainstorming, but instead it has individuals write down their ideas anonymously and then submit it to the group. What's nice about this technique then is you don't have to worry about individuals being scared to say something because they're afraid even if they say it, people are going to still judge them, even if they're not allowed to critique it at that time. And it separates the idea from the person. Because one bias you might have in a brainstorming session or just in any idea generation in general is if it comes from a particular person, and if it's a person you like, you might be more likely to go along with it, even if you notice there are problems. Or if an idea comes from a person who you don't like, you might be more likely to oppose it just because it comes from that person, even though the idea actually might be good. So the nominal group technique separates people from ideas, so each idea is evaluated without the person taken into account. So here's how the nominal group technique would work. And depending on the class, you might be asked to do this specific type of technique. So you want to make sure you understand how to do this. And it's a really great technique to use, by the way, anyway, in real life. So first, you're going to define the problem. Of course, you're always going to make sure that people know what they need to take into account when they develop a problem, and then also criteria for the solution. That's always part of it. Then you'll set a time limit. So technically I didn't put that down, but you want to make sure members have time to write down as many ideas as possible. So you're going to ask members to pull out a sheet of paper. Make sure it's anonymous. So don't let them write something down and then like have their name on it, because then it might get seen. So tell your members on a sheet of paper or on a Google Doc or whatever, just as long as it's anonymous, that's the critical thing, to write down as many ideas as possible and give them some time to just write silently. Don't let them discuss it. Just have each person write down their ideas or their solutions for an idea. Then, after the time has passed, you're going to ask members to submit their written ideas anonymously to a reader. Now, if you're the facilitator, they could submit them to you, just as long as you keep it anonymous is the idea. So you're going to get like depending on what you use, you might get like a stack of little papers or something, or sticky notes or whatever you're using. You're going to get a stack of sticky papers and notes, and maybe just to ensure there's anonymity and all that stuff, you can shuffle it in front of people like a little magician or something. I mean, whatever. But you just want to make sure that it appears to be anonymous and that it is anonymous. So we call this the silent zone. So this is where everyone's going to be silent and you're just having writing and submitting anonymously to you. Then you have the next zone. And the next zone is the non-judgment zone. What you're going to do is you're going to have the reader read each idea aloud to the group. So you have to make sure when your members submit that it's legible and all that stuff, but then you're going to have somebody go through the submitted papers and read each idea out loud. And they're not going to say, John said this is this, because they're not going to know who John, they're not going to know if it was John or not, or if it was Mary. So read the ideas out loud to the group. And then make sure as the ideas are being read out loud that they're also written on a public display. Because remember, you want to have a common visual display when you do brainstorming so people can reflect on ideas, read ideas, remember ideas, and all those things. So you might have to have a reader, and then you might also have to have like a board writer too to get everything on display. Now, if you do this electronically, then you may not have to, but then you still want to have a display like a Word doc or something, or a Jamboard, so people can see everything being suggested. And then you want to clarify each idea without advocating for one. So when you clarify an idea, what you're going to do is you're just going to say, this seems like a good idea. What do you all like? What do you think would this idea, like, this seems like a good idea. What else about this idea seems good? Okay. So you have members clarify and you say, this idea could be good because blah, 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 blah. So we're not judging. We're just letting people expand on ideas and basically say, I think this idea could also include this, or this idea could be good because it could also include that. And you're just trying to grow the ideas and allow people to kind of branch off of them. So then you're kind of doing regular brainstorming again, but you don't have to, nobody's married to a specific idea because you don't know who proposed who. Because I could branch on somebody else's idea and you might think it's mine or you might think it's somebody else's. Then you have the action zone. In the action zone, you're going to have members rank the best 5 solutions. So you're going to do a ranking vote type of voting. So you're going to say, here are the ideas, rank them 1 through 5 or 10 or whatever limit you want to set. Then you want the group to see the ranking results and you want them to be able to discuss it. If the first round of ranking is inconclusive, then you can have the options re-ranked again, and maybe you'll cut 2 of them if there were 2 that were maybe really low ranking. And then the group re-ranks, and if it's undecided, you go with the top choice. So when you share the rankings, you can also discuss them and maybe talk some pros and cons for each ranking. But at the end of the day, you try to make nominal group technique as silent as possible. So there is that. So there's different ways to do the nominal group technique is what I'm saying. Like as far as like, can you have discussion here? Like in 7, 8, and 9? Yeah, you technically can. And even here, like you don't want to be negative about an idea, but if you want to expand on it, you can. But if anything, if you do any evaluation, I recommend doing it here between 7, 8, and 9. After you rank the results the first time, I think around 8 would probably be the time to discuss merits of ideas and such. And then re-rank if you need to. Okay, so that's the nominal group technique, silent brainstorming. That's the bumper sticker if you have to remember nominal group technique. Silent brainstorming, write it down, submit it anonymously, separate the idea from the person. And then you have electronic brainstorming. Now, I don't have a whole lot here, but essentially electronic brainstorming is traditional brainstorming, or it's traditional brainstorming, but you're using an application or a website to facilitate it. So it can be done face-to-face, remotely, or in combination. But essentially, you just do brainstorming, but instead of people perhaps submitting papers online, or submitting papers to you anonymously, you might have people like write comments on a document or something. And then you just kind of do so then it's not nominal group technique because you'll know who wrote what, but then it's still like traditional because then you know who's suggesting what, but it may be done asynchronously. So there's a lot of versions of electronic brainstorming, but the key thing that makes it electronic is the fact that you're using a website or an application of some kind that helps facilitate brainstorming. And then lastly, you have the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique is also good for electronic brainstorming, and it kind of takes the nominal group technique even further. So the Delphi technique is named after the Oracle Delphi, and generally what makes the Delphi technique is that you do this over writing or email. So you don't actually meet face-to-face when you do the Delphi technique, or at least not initially. And you have somebody electronically coordinate the collection of ideas. So here's how it would work. It's also known as absentee brainstorming, by the way. So this is when you cannot get people in a room together, but you have to brainstorm solutions, or there's no time to have a meeting. So then you might use the Delphi technique. So here's how it would work. So first, you're going to define the problem. So perhaps you'll do this in an email. You're going to say, here's the problem that we're facing, and here's some criteria for the solutions. Then, what you're going to do is you're going to create a questionnaire for members. So maybe you'll make a Google form or a Jot form or whatever. And in the questionnaire, you're going to solicit members' advice on some questions that relate to the problem. Then, after you send out this questionnaire, and so this is called the leader zone, by the way. So this is where the leader is really in control, and you define the problem and you create the questions that you want people to answer. It's going to be like a little homework assignment that you're going to give everyone. Then you're going to have members submit their ideas to the questionnaire. So give them a deadline, maybe give them a couple days. Answer this questionnaire, let me know what you think. And this is the beginning of the idea zone. And then the leader, once the deadline is passed, you're going to share all the answers in a public display. So maybe you did it in a Google form and you're going to share the results page of the Google form. In any case, all of the members are going to be able to see all of the ideas and answers. Then, as a leader, you're going to ask for input on the summary. So you're going to give people time to look at the summary of answers that were submitted and all the ideas and answers to each of the questions, and just ask for people's input. And this is a time where people can critically evaluate and reflect on things, because this is the action zone. And after you've had some discussion and people have given their piece on the ideas in the summary, you can decide to either rank, rate, or vote on the ideas, the best ideas, with comments. So you can also ask when the people vote to give some comments too, and that can also help facilitate further input. So this is the action zone. Then, once you get all the voting and the rankings or the ratings, you're going to summarize the evaluations and ask for more feedback. So let's say there isn't like a clear consensus to a solution. You can at least share, here's where people were split. We have 3 people that were in favor of this, 3 people in favor of that, 2 people in favor of this. What do you all think of this? Here's where, when people voted, some people wrote comments like, I really like this idea, but I really think it's blah, blah. So that's where those comments really come to play. So your ballot's going to include a ranking, rating, and voting, plus additional comments behind it. And then see if you can create consensus that way once people have seen the results. Now, if what you may have to do is do another ranking, so you might have to repeat step 6 after you've done 7, if there's more discussion, and then just keep repeating, steps 5, 6, and 7 until you get to where you need to go. So this is known as the repetitive zone because you might have to repeat 7 a lot. Now, the reason we teach all this is because we want you to be able to avoid groupthink. And we'll talk about groupthink next.